All right, so in this video, we're going to go through how we can use this framework to analyze shocks to an economy, okay? So shocks are things that happen to it from outside the model, and then we see how the model responds, okay? So we're going to start with a demand shock, okay? So this is the market, and here's the firm. And we'll show you what happens in the long run and the short run. So here's our demand curve. And let's next draw a marginal cost curve that looks like this. And notice that this time, just for no reason, I put the marginal cost as starting at this, which means the price has to be at a certain level before firms are going to enter. And that's important for how I draw the supply curve because I've got to start at the same point. If none of the individual firms are going to supply at that level, then the whole market won't either. And for simplicity, this time I'm going to assume we start at the long run equilibrium. So I'm going to make long run supply go right through here. And so this is an economy that is in its long run equilibrium. And what that means is that I need to make sure that I draw my average cost so that it crosses marginal cost at its own minimum right at this point. That's the best I can get. So what's going on here? This is an economy sort of at rest. It has no reason to change. All firms are operating at the minimum efficient scale, where price equals average cost equals marginal cost. And the market is in its long run equilibrium where no new firms are going to enter or exit because the profit of all firms is exactly zero. What happens now if demand shifts? So what do I mean by that? Let's scroll down here. Why would demand change? So a demand curve is the link between the price and the quantity demanded, okay? But since we've gone through the exercise of deriving the demand curve from individual people, we know that a lot of other factors determine the quantity demanded. And if any of those other factors change, we express that in our graph by moving the curve, okay? So, for example, if the price of goods that are complements or substitutes change, it will change demand. So complements are goods that naturally go together. So if, for example, this is the demand for, Xbox controllers and the price of Xbox consoles goes down, it's going to increase the demand for the controllers. Substitutes are goods that you don't need both. You sort of need one or the other. So if I like eating meat and beef I don't really care if I eat beef or pork and the price of pork falls, I'm going to switch to pork, and that's bad for the demand for beef, even if the price of beef is unaffected. It will be affected by that demand fall, but not immediately, right? So the price of other goods can change demand. Other things that can drive demand is sometimes called consumer tastes, but in our framework, it's changes in the utility function. Okay, so we've been thinking of the utility function as sort of this timeless map of your preferences, but people change what they like from time to time. Okay, things get popular, things get unpopular due to advertising or new uses that are discovered for it, or just as you mature or change. Okay. Another thing that can shift your demand is your income. As people have more income, they're going to buy more goods that are normal goods and fewer goods that are inferior goods, and that will affect the demand they have for those goods at any given price. Lastly, the number of people. If there's more people all with identical preferences, there's going to be more demand. If there's less people, then there'll be less demand. So if you have a baby boom, that will increase demand. If you have a bunch of immigration into your country, that will increase demand. If you have a bunch of out-migration out of your country, that will decrease demand. If people move away from the city or move into the city, that can change demand. Okay? And all these things could be going on at once. You can imagine a country that is growing fast with its population and also its income, and so demand is really rapidly rising, and so on. As an economist, what you need to do is, if something changes in your market, you need to think, how's that going to affect demand or supply? And we've talked about the factors that affect the demand curve. Let's suppose that something happens, one of those factors, that drives demand up. Okay, so demand goes out to here. This means that it takes, for any given quantity, a higher price is needed before people will buy exactly that quantity. Alternatively put, at any given price, more quantity is demanded by this increase in the number of people. So what happens? Well, in the short run, new firms and businesses don't enter or exit. Okay, in the short run, supply and demand, as written here, equilibrate. The price rises because people now, at this quantity, are willing to pay a lot more for the good. But as they do that, they bid up the price, and that increases the supply until we arrive at the point where supply equals demand again. We find the new price. Oops. We kind of went sideways there. Okay. And we can carry that over to the other figure and see what happens there. Where price equals marginal cost, that tells us how individual firms maximize their profit. Okay? So what's going on in this market? This is a great time. This shift for demand is really good for the firms that are in the market. Okay? People want their product, and so they respond by selling more of it, and so on. The total quantity supplied by the market rises. All these firms are making positive profit. In the long run, though, that's not economically stable. This new booming market, a lot of other people notice it and they say, I want a piece of that action. And so they start founding their own businesses that enter the market. As these businesses enter, the supply increases, and that starts to pull the the price down, until we get to the new long run equilibrium. Okay? So initially the price goes up, but then it starts to walk back down the demand curve, and we end up back where we started, because that is the minimum efficient scale. In the long run, it's these cost structures that determine the optimal size for firms. So what has happened in this market? In the short run, the increase in demand caused a price spike, and it was a really good time for the firms that were in the market. They made higher profits than normal. In the long run, the price fell back down to the levels set by the cost structure of this product. And what happened is the number of firms that are operating efficiently increased. So consumers ended up paying the same price for more stuff produced by more firms that are all operating efficiently.